Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. So in this episode, I want to cover a very common business scenario called prepaid expenses. And in Dynamics F&O terminology, it is called accrual scheme. So first, I'm going to explain what is the business scenario of prepaid expense to help you understand. And then we can get to the technical part to show you the prerequisites of how to set up accrual scheme. And then finally, I'm going to give you an end-to-end demo to walk you through the expense booking and review the accounting posting entries. So without further ado, let's get started. First, let me explain what is prepaid expenses. So I quickly prepared this scenario walkthrough. So let's say typically, the business will prepay for rent or for corporate tax or for insurance for the whole year. And then on monthly basis, from accounting perspective, they need to reflect the actual cost of that specific month. So think about it like a accrual entry, right? So let's take an example of the rent. Basically, my scenario is my company needs to pay out the rent at the beginning of the year for the whole year, right? So this is what you see at the first step, prepaid for 1 year at 1/1/2025. So at that time of booking, if I have an invoice somewhere to record, then I can use this accounting entry. So accounts payable, credit for the whole year, 12,000. And then the debit side will be a prepaid rent for the same amount. And then if you make the payment to the landlord, it's going to be reversing that AP from credit to debit, and that credits the cash. So that's your bank account. So the AP account cancels out. Basically, for this entry, it becomes prepaid rent on debit side and the cash and bank on the credit side. So if you don't have any invoice to be recorded, you can also directly book your prepaid rent debit and cash credit from a single entry, right? So that's from the prepaid perspective for the whole year, basically impacting your AP and cash. Now, let's say for accounting team, on monthly basis, I don't have the visibility of the actual expense for this rent for the specific month, right? And as part of the accounting rules, we need to recognize the cost on monthly basis of this prepaid 12,000 to be spread out or across 12 months. So each month, I would expect to see an entry like this. So it's going to reverse the prepaid rent only for the monthly 1,000, assuming it's evenly allocated on monthly basis for a 12-month period, right? So you can see initially I have my prepaid rent on the debit side, and now I reverse out 1,000 from the initial debit. And the actual debit side will be recorded for the actual expense. So that's my rent expense. That way, when I do accounting reporting, I'm going to see, okay, actually for this month, I have 1,000 for rent, and that moves out 1,000 from the initial prepaid rent. And at the end of the year, you're going to see your prepaid rent is going to be zero out. This is part of the reconciliation. You can check, okay, actually everything moves from prepaid to expense. So this is a very high level explanation from accounting perspective, how to manage the prepaid expenses. Now let's move on to dynamics. So to the technical part, we can use accrual scheme functionality to manage this so the system can automatically manage this part of posting on monthly basis, meaning that in Dynamics, you just book your prepaid transaction. And then based on this transaction, the system is going to spread out into 12 months and post the transaction for each month with the correct date and calculation. Now let me show you how we set up that accrual scheme in Dynamics as part of the prerequisite. So that's the one-time configuration point. And then from there, we can do an end-to-end demo. Now let me switch to my system. So the accrual scheme setup is going to happen under GL. Let me move to the right side. You have the section journal set up, and then I'm going to click on accrual scheme. So let's take an existing one. There are multiple ways to handle the debit and credit account. I'll just show you one way to do that for today. So this one is for yearly accrual entry. So you can see 12-month accrual. You can make it specific for rent or for insurance if they are having a different account. So in my scenario, let's say what is required in the setup. First, I need to give a debit and credit account. In my case, I'm using this accrued purchase account, but you can use also that prepaid expense account. Again, as I said, there are many ways to design this debit and credit. So in today's episode, I'll just use the same accrued expense account for both debit and credit. You're going to see how that's reflected on the actual posting later on, right? And then we define the period frequency. So we want to lease out across 12 months. So that's why I put 12 monthly. And then for voucher, the best practice is to define a new voucher for each accrual transaction. So what does that mean? Initially, we book the total prepaid expenses for the whole year, right? And now on monthly basis, system is going to generate an automatic entry for that monthly transaction. Now it's asking you, do you want to have new voucher for each monthly transaction, or you just want to reuse the same voucher? So best practice, we assume we want to use this new voucher for each transaction. That way, on monthly basis, you have a new voucher assigned. And moving on, you have this number sequence code. This is like AP invoice voucher. It's really not a big deal. You can select a specific voucher for tracking purposes. And accrual basis. So for this, you have the possibility to define based on calendar or fiscal calendar or a specific allocation key. So what's the difference? Let's say if I have a company using fiscal calendar, meaning starting from the 1st of April till the end of March. And for my specific allocation, the allocation happens in January instead of the fiscal starting point from 1st of April. So in that case, you have the difference between your calendar year and the fiscal year. So you have the possibility and flexibility to define for the specific allocation which calendar we should be using. So this is the guidance for the system to understand what is the monthly date range it should use, right? So currently I'm going to use this calendar. And then moving on, you can post the transactions on monthly basis, or you only want to post on quarterly basis or weekly. So you can define it here. And also let the system know when do you want to post the monthly entry. At the beginning of the month, 1/1/2025, or at the end of the month, 1/31/2025, or in the middle, right? And finally, here is the kind of the allocation or spread method. So you can do evenly. So this is our case, right? Spread out across 12 months evenly. Or you can also be based on the number of days. So it's kind of the prorate, but let's deal with the most straightforward one at first. So evenly, right? Now, with everything set up, I can save it and we can move on to the actual journal entry and show you the accounting posting. So typically, we're going to book a GL entry, again, general ledger and general journal. There are multiple ways to book this journal entry. So I'm going to create a new journal and then pick a journal name. Let's do GL and go to lines. Okay, again, as I said, depending on your business scenario, if you have an invoice to book or you book directly to prepaid expense account, you can have different ways to book it here. So first thing, let's do the date. So in my scenario, I prepaid my yearly rent at 1/1/2025. So I'm going to put it here as the initial date. And then accounting type here. If you have an invoice, you can directly hit your subledger by using the vendor, and the offset is going to be the expense account. Or you can also book to a direct GL account. Let's say you don't have any vendor invoice, you just want to book to the prepaid expense account. So if that's the case, you can also pick a GL. So in my case, let's pick a vendor, and then I'm going to do this account, Acme Office. All right, you can give a description, prepaid rent, and that's going to be my credit, 12,000. And moving to the right, it's going to be my ledger account, so it can be the expense account. I'll just leave this default one. Okay, so once we're ready, next step is going to apply that accrual scheme we previously defined, right? So this is under functions and do ledger accruals, accrual identification. So in this dropdown, we're going to select which accrual scheme we want to use. So this is the 12-month accrual we want to use. This is the base amount, 12,000. Start date, when do you want to start the allocation? And then which account you want to allocate. Okay, now let's continue with the transactions. So this transaction gives you the preview of monthly transaction, right? You can see the posting date is going to be simulated for January, February, March. So for each month, we're going to have a reversal transaction of this prepaid rent minus 1,000, and that means it's credit side. And then on the debit side is going to be the actual prepaid rent account, 1,000. And if that works, then you can save it and go back, click OK. It's going to apply for that accrual, right? Once everything is ready, you can continue to hit post button. All right, now once the transaction is posted, let's say I want to see the future posting. And if I open up the voucher, it's not going to give me all the monthly transaction posting. So to see that, you're going to use that print option. So under print, you can check this posted transactions by journal. And then let's open this up. All right, let's zoom it out. All right, so from this view, what you can see first, this is the voucher, right? Every time for each month, you have a different voucher. So this matches our setting when we say every month, give me a new voucher. And then secondly, for each month, for January period, you can see every time we debit the actual expense and credit the accrual purchase account. So I apologize for this GL account using. Normally we should use the rent account, but this is a demo environment. I didn't find one. Just assuming this supply expense is your rent account, and it's going to give you this accounting entry for each month, and every time it's going to be a new voucher. So you can check until the end of December for 12 period, right? Now, the last voucher you see here is actually the initial journal entry we entered before the allocation. So what you see here is first on the subledger, I have my vendor booked on the accounts payable side. So my subledger vendor is having credit, and that links to my GL accounts to the accounts payable, 12,000. So it's not double accounting, it's just the first line is showing my subledger transaction, and that reflects on the GL side is matching this accounts payable credit. And the other side is my accrued purchase. So this is my prepaid expense account that we predefined from that accrual scheme. So accounting entry perspective, it matches exactly what we expect to see from that Excel spreadsheet. And once this journal is posted, that means on monthly basis, you no longer need to remember to reverse manually and put to the right expense account, right? So this is great functionality. However, we do have caveat, which is to make this work, you have to keep future periods open, meaning that now we're posting to December the 1st, 2025, and we are only in May, right? And for some companies, they don't want their system to be open for future periods just to avoid other people coming in and starting posting transactions in future periods. That's understandable. If that's the case, accrual scheme probably is not a good choice for them. And as a workaround, potentially what you can suggest is to use a journal template. For example, a periodic journal or a journal voucher template. So every time you have the same template created and already available for this accrued expense reversal versus the actual expense account, and prepare that entry ready. So monthly basis, you just retrieve this journal entry and post because it's the same amount every time, right? So it can also be handled through periodic journal in case we don't want to open the future periods. All right, I think that's everything I want to cover today. In case you have other options to design this, please feel free to comment and share your thoughts. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next episode.